Good evening. Today is Thursday, March 21st, 2019. I now call this Fairfield City School District regular board meeting to order. Mrs. Lambert, you call the roll, please.
Mr. Begley?
Here.
Mr. Birding?
Present.
Mr. Hare?
Present.
Mrs. O'Neill? Mrs. Shorter?
Here.
Mr. Hare, will you lead us in the pledge, please?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Hare. First item on the agenda is presentations and resolutions. I'll turn it over to Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Birding and members of the board. We do have several presentations scheduled this evening. Our first presentation is from the Butler County Auditor's Office. At this time, I'd like to welcome Julie Joyce Smith up to the podium.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me a few moments of your time. And Mr. Hare, no, I do not have a check for you. But getting to my first item on my list, tax bills were due to the Butler County Treasurer on February 28th. The Treasurer has certified the collections to us as of the 15th of March, so we are feverishly working on the settlement as we speak. So we will have checks to you, or at least ACH wires to you in the next couple weeks with the first half tax collection revenue. One of the talking points that I have used and probably will not surprise you is the fuel quality testing. Recently, we had several instances, maybe a half dozen, of bad gas stranding cars and stranding motorists after pumping bad gas throughout Butler County. We had several instances of this is at a gas station in Madison Township, and on the same day there was a gas station in Westchester. So once again, we're looking at the prospect of, while we test for quantity, we're not able to test for quality, and it is something that Auditor Reynolds and the other auditors across the state of Ohio are pushing the legislative to allow us to be able to do this legally. Now, the governor has got a House bill out right now, House Bill 62, that got through the House, and unfortunately, we thought there might be an amendment to allow for fuel quality testing, but it did not make that. The Senate, I believe we have until midnight tonight, and we're still hopeful that we can get the amendment tacked on to the Senate bill of the transportation bill to, again, allow us the ability to test fuel quality. If you'll look for it on Sunday, the Enquirer, there'll be a guest article by Auditor Dusty Rhodes, and he's making his plea as to why it's important to Ohioans, important to folks in Butler County and Hamilton County to have this implemented. With looking at an additional tax at the pump, we think that the consumer deserves the right to know that they're getting what they pay for. And so it's been ongoing. There's been a lot of articles in the newspaper and on the news and radio as well discussing the fuel quality, the gas tax. And so we feel like this is a great time to step up our efforts to get that through. So you'll probably hear more from me on that. And again, if you have any questions about that, I'm certainly happy to explain or talk to you about that. My next item is in the auditor's office. The Monday, March 4th was the filing deadline to renew CAUV, which is current agricultural use value exemptions for farmers. I thought it was interesting to find out that here in Fairfield City School District, there are still over 2,800 acres active in the CAUV program. So while we think of Fairfield as a booming community, there is still a pretty large agricultural component out there, and I just thought I'd share that because I like nerdy facts and things like that. Finally, again, every taxpayer has the opportunity to appeal their value, and this year is no different. Normally, the deadline is March 31st, but since that falls on a weekend, it's going to be Monday, April the 1st. So if you or anyone you know is interested in appealing your value and has questions about how to do it, how to get the forms, what's required, you certainly can visit our website, or you can give me a call in the Butler County Auditor's Office, and I will help walk you through that. And if you have any questions at this time, I'd be happy to answer them or do my best.
Any questions or comments?
I haven't seen anything in the news lately about the skimmers.
No, we've made some progress with one of the suspects. We have pretty good video image of him. We've been working with the FBI, and we were hoping in the next couple of weeks to be able to give more information about that. But I believe we have managed to get some good video of the suspect's face and actually the vehicle. And in some case, we have a little bit I think we were able to capture the license plate of the vehicle they were driving. So they didn't realize that we had a camera inside the pump, so.
Well, we certainly appreciate the good efforts of the auditor's office.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, for our next presentation, we have a school spotlight on our high school. This time, I'll turn it over to our high school principal, Mr. Bill Rice.
Good evening. We are excited to be here tonight as we are going to spotlight some wonderful examples of student leadership. One of our challenges at the high school, we understand that we are a large building. We have almost 2,400 students in our building. So we have to be very intentional in our work to reach every student every day. Our conversation with you this evening will focus on two topics: how we build a sense of community in a high school this big, and how we make a large school feel small. These students we have with you this evening are great representatives of the caring, nurturing environment we work so hard to establish. They are leaders in many areas, both in the classroom and outside of the classroom. And we are excited to hear from each of them about the organizations that they lead. At this time, I will introduce to you the first group, which will be led by Jordan Peters and Callie Spurlock. They will talk about the Spirit Club.
Good evening, and thank you for letting me share my club with you. My name is Jordan Peters. I'm a senior at Fairfield High School. Next year, I will be attending the University of Cincinnati for chemical engineering. And this is my vice president, Callie Spurlock. She is a junior at Fairfield High School. For Spirit Club, we have two main purposes, and that's to spread spirit not only in the school, but in our community as a whole. How we do this is we do some volunteer work in the school and outside. So we sell shirts and stuff for spirit events such as football games, basketball games, stuff like that. And we do things like birthday announcements just to let everybody know that we're happy that they're here and that they are recognized in this school. All the money that we gain from things such as selling these shirts for spirit events will be donated back into the school to help improve and further our school as well. For the second part, I will be introducing my Vice President, Callie Spurlock.
Thank you, Jordan. I would like to talk about in further detail what kind of charity and donations that we do in Spirit Club. So our annual giving tree is kind of like we talk to Cincinnati Children's, and the children there will write down toys or other items that they're hoping to get for Christmas that they might not get because, their medical bills are so expensive. So as a school, we post those on a tree outside of the office with the items. A student will take the item list and they'll bring it back to a teacher's room, which is kind of like the teacher that runs our club. And they'll bring it in there, and then once we have all of those, we take those back to Cincinnati Children's, and then the children will have their desired items for Christmas time. Also, we are planning to start doing the same thing for Easter for Cincinnati Children's, but we're going to be doing Easter baskets. And we're also planning to start doing Thanksgiving donations for our community who isn't as fortunate to have such meals on Thanksgiving. And the way that this is going to help our school transform from a big school to kind of a smaller community in our school is that even though the school is so big, our students coming together to donate to a cause bigger than them is going to make us feel a lot more unified. Thank you.
Next, I would like to introduce two of our student section leaders, what we call our tribe, Caitlin Begley and Jordan Brown.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Begley, and I will be going to the University of Kentucky next year, and I'm going to study nursing. So about the student section, I am one of the leaders of the student section. There are 4 of us, and being a part of a really big student section is super overwhelming, but it's also one of the best things that I've ever been a part of. Bringing that many people together to cheer for the same team is so cool because in our separate lives, we are all sort of cheering for the different teams, whether that be professional or college. But so we somehow always butt heads, but on Friday nights, we're all on the same side and we're all on the same team, and we all sort of feel like a family. And so one of the cool things about that is, like, when we're actually cheering, you know, you hear all these different voices, but at the same time, all of our voices become one. So we're all sort of unified in that way. And with themes, we're all dressed the same. So it's something that we can connect on because when we go to school, everyone is dressed different, and all of our differences are so big that when we come together and we have something in common, it makes our differences feel a little bit smaller. So we sort of feel like a family. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Jordan Brown, and this coming up school year, I will be attending the University of Kentucky and also studying nursing. I've been a varsity cheerleader for the past year, but I've been cheering for 12 years, and I've cheered both competitively and for the school, and nothing tops cheering in front of the large tribe under the Friday night lights. It's just such an amazing feeling to have like your own squad to back you up and cheer with you, and it has been such an amazing thing to be a part of, so I've loved every moment of it.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to introduce 2 of our student council leaders, Hung Nguyen and Sierra King.
Hi, my name is Hung. I'm 95% sure I'm going to Ohio State University next year. I plan on majoring in biology, going into like a pre-med track.
I'm Sierra King, and I'm either going to OSU or UC. I'm really conflicted. I'm going in for pharmacy, and I'm really excited, but yeah.
So we're going to be talking to you about student council today. So the main purpose of student council is to hear the voices of like the student body and make sure that no one is underlooked and to make sure that everyone's voices is heard. One of the main things that we do for student council is plan Spirit Week. So the crazy thing with Spirit Week is it's something that like is unique for everyone to show like their individuality, and it's just a way to be goofy with the other students.
We also do a blood drive as the senior class council. We had one in December, and it was really, really successful. In the past few years, we haven't done 2, but our second one is actually tomorrow, so we're really excited. And the events like the blood drive not only bring us together as a school, just it brings it out to the community to help give to local hospitals, and it's really cool. Some people even get like calls to see like who they donated to, and it just makes you feel good to know that you're helping the community even in high school.
And then we're also in charge of planning stuff like homecoming and prom. And then with like just a giant student body with around like 3,000 in the school, I could be off about that. But it's kind of hard to please everyone, and then our job is to make sure that everyone can have a great time, no matter what or how small or big our school is.
And then senior trip, as our high school years dwindle down, it's kind of crazy for all of us to think, but most of us have been together for about 12 years. So us planning something like as a big final hurrah is really important, just to bring at least the seniors together to the end and make everything of the school year remembered and good. So yeah, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next group that will be represented is the National Honor Society, Amana Shanawas, and Jill Reimer. And Amana will actually stay up here for the next group after that, which is Junior State of America.
Hello, my name is Amina, and I am currently a junior at the high school, but next year I plan to be the president of NHS. So some of the events that NHS does, as you can see up there, the mission statement is present, and so some of the events that we do are community service at the elementary schools. So if you see on the slide, we do literary nights, we do several events across the district to help people that need it. And along with that, we do peer tutoring. So students volunteer to tutor their fellow students and their peers with whatever homework, whatever tests that they need help with. And along with that, we are currently doing a campaign to have seniors write to freshmen. So the NHS is sifting through those letters and making sure that they're appropriate. And we're providing advice to the freshmen that are new to the building and unprepared. So that's some of the stuff that we do. And then Jill here is going to talk about how NHS makes our school feel smaller.
Hi, I'm Jill Reimer. So I am planning to be the secretary next year of NHS. To me, I feel like NHS really brings our giant school together because it gives kids a way to work on their leadership skills and feel like they can stand out in such a big school. It also really gives people a place to connect to other students who have similar interests to them and similar, want to lead others. And it also gives people a place and a thing to be a part of, which is really inspiring and what I love about it. So, thank you.
All right, and I'm also here to talk about JSA. So this year, I'm the vice president of JSA. Basically, JSA, as you can see on the mission statement, we provide a place for students to discuss political issues and various topics that most people would try to avoid. But JSA provides a place for students to voice their opinions and to make friends and to do what they believe in. So that's how it makes our school feel smaller, because we provide a place for people to speak up. So, thank you.
Thank you. And the last group will be Interact, represented today by Puela Alcantara Arias.
Hello, guys. So my name is Paula Alcantara, and I will be going to UC for international business. So my club that I represent is Interact, and Interact is a community service club, and I've been a part of it for 2 years as a board member and as a regular member. But what I love about Interact is that through community service, you can invite, the group, the whole club, it's not selection based. So you can invite your friends to come to the club, and it makes it even more fun. But we also, as a board member, we make fun activities and fun community service. Community service, sometimes the events just kind of like trickle out after Christmas break, and then there's not as many events. So we make events in this room after school for our meetings, just small little things like making cards for the custodians, or this week we made signs encouraging signs to put up around the school, and if you've seen them, they're pretty cool, they're pretty cute. And then I just love how you can have your friends here, but then you can also meet new friends, and then you see them at community events, and then you see them at school, and then you just know that you have made at least one new friend that makes this school seem a lot less smaller. Thank you.
So I think we're in pretty good hands. I tell these guys all the time, it's absolutely impossible for just 4 administrators to lead a building this size. But these guys, student leadership helps to do that each and every day. So I thank each of them for being here tonight, and now you get to go home. Thank you.
Are there any comments from the board?
Sure. A couple comments. One is I've always enjoyed Friday night football games to see our student cheering section from the other end zone, and also very proud of all of you that went over to the Milford game, sat there in the rain and the cold to cheer on our team. Perhaps we ought to video the political discussions and have that serve as a role model for our country and discussing issues without all the acrimony. What a fine example I'm sure our kids set. And I guess this just validates that our high school administration expects you to give your blood, sweat, and cheers. But we really appreciate all the efforts that you put into doing things, and that's why Fairfield High School is so great.
Any other comments, questions?
Sure, I want to I want to thank our Interact student. Interact is the high school level Rotary Club, sponsored by Rotary, and 3 of the board members are Rotarians, so that level of involvement can last a lifetime, service to your community. So thank you to everyone here for what you do. To the juniors, that's great that you're involved already. You'll hit the ground running next year and have a big senior year. To our seniors, I wish you well in all your future endeavors. Thank you for what you did here.
I'd just like to say that you guys did a wonderful job. It's great to see you representing. And Jill, I remember you from Mrs. Super's kindergarten class. Look at you guys. I'm just so impressed. Thank you very much for all the work you do in the schools.
I also want to thank the students for coming tonight. It's always a pleasure to have students coming present to the board. It makes the time and effort that we put in worthwhile to see sort of the benefactors of our decisions. So thank you very much for coming. I will tell you that you're not expected to stay for the rest of the meeting. You're more than welcome to leave. There is a very exciting presentation coming up next from Mr. Penny about Building Pride 2.0, but like I said, feel free to leave if you'd like. So thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Everyone's leaving.
Come on.
Mr. Smith?
All right, with that lead in, I will turn it over to Mr. Joe Penny for our last presentation of the evening, Building Pride 2.0.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, Mr. Birding, members of the board. I'm returning to you at this meeting regarding the topic of Building Pride 2.0 or 2019. Back in December, I did a presentation on Building Pride and master planning, and I was asked to return with more information and a plan for the future, a plan for where we could take this. And that's what I'm here for this evening, amongst other things. So this discussion this evening will focus on 2 things. I'm going to do a short review of the prior presentation that I did back in December, and then I'm going to move forward to a proposed 5-step plan for success for your consideration. This slide should look familiar to everyone. This was a slide I used last time I presented on this back in December for, do you need me to move a little closer? Okay. Sorry about that. To show the age of our buildings and also our prior assessment of our buildings back in 2011. And the rule with the OFCC, it used to be OSFC, and now it's OFCC, which has been for a few years. But if a building's evaluated and the cost to renovate is over 2/3 of the cost, then they recommend replacement. Ultimately, they say if you move forward with their program, you have to do a replacement unless there's a special exemption that you can put in for historical buildings, things like that, that are on the registry. So, as you can tell, our buildings overall were over that threshold of 2/3. Except for our 2 newest buildings, outside of the new ones we just built, which are Central, Freshman, and Campus, which are East Elementary and the high school. But they are now over 20 years old. So they're showing a little bit of age themselves. Still solid buildings, obviously, but they need repair, and in the future they may need renovation also. So in December, one of the things that we discussed was conversations with OFCC and what our options were for the future in regards to potentially getting additional state money. We are a segmented district, which means that we were in the classroom facility assistance program initially and segmented. So we decided instead of doing the whole district at once and trying to have all the buildings built, that we would take a certain segment, build those, and then we'd move on to future ones in the future. And as a segmented district, we thought that we would be able to, anytime it was the board's will, community's will, to move forward with this move forward with the OFCC program and the funding, to go ahead and engage in that. I'll talk about this slide and next slide, and I might blend them together a little bit, but they are slides that I discussed last meeting. Anyway, we were told that we don't have the right to exercise that option immediately if the board decided to do so. That we were on a list that we would be about 7 to 8 years out from actually being able to do that. Now, those were projected numbers. Also, with that being said, it doesn't mean that new governor and new things in place, that things couldn't shift. But at that time when we met with the OFCC, which is still currently the case since December, nothing's changed, we were told that we were at that place. Officially on the formal list, and this doesn't count deferred schools or anything like that, we're number 373, I believe, but deferred schools would move us up. But ultimately, like I said, those things can change with different governor and things like that. Moving on to the next slide. Based on current state funding levels and projected timing of funding offers, legislation could be promoted to potentially benefit Fairfield City School District. The conceptual legislation would be, currently, there's an expedited local partnership program the districts can enter into while they're waiting to get their number called on the list, if they chose to do so. There is a challenge with this for Fairfield City Schools amongst some other districts in the state. There is no program for districts that are in a segmented CFAP program, or segmented, meaning they started the program, to be able to actually use the expedited local partnership program. So that means ultimately we cannot take advantage of the ELPP program or that expedited local partnership program at this point without legislative changes. So for instance, if we decided that we were going to shoulder some of the burden of renovation of the building or the end portions of master planning at this point, and we said, well, we're part of the expedited local partnership program, we would like to have that credited back to us when we decide, if we decide to move forward with building. Well, at this point, that is not something that we can enter into because we have that segmented title. And as I mentioned back in December, I asked the question of OFCC as well as SHP, which is working with us in partnership, what's our advantage of being segmented? Because initially going into this, the advantage of being segmented was being able to take advantage of moving forward with the program when we felt that we needed to. And what I was told ultimately was segmentation will secure our 26% funding from the OFCC and the state, but at the same time, it handicaps us from being able to take advantage of an expedited local partnership program if we chose to. So really the only advantage at this point for us to be in the segmented program, which I was told we cannot opt out of since we started, is that securing of 26% funding. Another thing, real quick before I move ahead, I will say is, with the new governor in place, and from the different people I've talked to, any type of, at least what I've been encouraged to spread the word about is local legislative people that are in place, anyone we could talk to about maybe having this be a discussion up at the state level would definitely be supportive for us in the future. It would give us options, as well as other districts options that are in this situation that they could not take advantage of the expedited local partnership program. With that being said, I'm not for sure at this point, and I know we'd have to do a lot of consideration to decide whether this is a program we'd want to take advantage of anyway. But at the same time, we should have the option to do so. And that's something that at this point, OFCC has communicated that they're neutral on the topic because it's a legislative issue. So I also wanted to mention that. So moving on to the new portion of the presentation for this evening, I'm returning with a 5-step plan for success. Within this plan, you'll find that there's trigger points that will allow us to make decisions on whether we move forward, if we decide to go with this plan, or if we decide to hold. And we can hold for a small amount of time or an indefinite amount of time. So I'll start with number one of the plan, which is facility assessment. As it says here, the facility assessment is going to allow us to assess our building envelope, the mechanicals, physical environment of our current facilities. I believe wholeheartedly it's going to provide a solid foundation for our planning, not just from purely capital planning, but also from our maintenance planning and the projects that we do in summers to make sure that we keep everything up to spec the way, well, our students deserve it to be. So the last assessment was formally completed in 2011 with assistance from the state in this assessment. We would end up using that as a foundation point. So we wouldn't have to start from scratch because of all the great work that was completed at that point. And then it was slightly revised. I want to say 2014, the numbers were improved a tad as we were going into the building process with our 3 new buildings. Now we're 5 years past that. And I believe that it would be a really strong, wise decision to have a formal facility assessment completed. And as far as timelines go, starting in the fall and doing so in the fall. Moving on to the second step, which would be evaluation of the assessment results, because data without evaluation doesn't really do us much good. So what we would do is we would look at the facility assessment results, similar to what the beginning of a master plan starts with. This is all the components of a master plan. It's just we're taking them in stride. So we would look at what the results from the facility assessment were, which would be completed by SHP. And then we would look at our current maintenance plan that Mr. Weiser and the team put together in prior years, which I've been looking at also. And we would also look to see if there's any perceived needs that we need to put into this. And then, working with Mrs. Lane, talk about fiscal planning, how everything fits together in this component. That information, being that the assessment's kind of gauged starting in fall 2019, first half of 2020 would allow us the time to be able to really assess that information, process, synthesize it, and be able to provide information to everyone, including the board, about the next steps. So, step number 3, progress assessment. So I might have said a little bit of this already, but utilizing the decisions and information compiled through steps 1 and 2 of the process, we would decide whether it was time to begin the next phases of the plan for master planning. Consideration would also be given to our status with the OFCC, any legislative changes that may occur between now and that time. And then a decision to move forward would be the beginning of the stakeholder engagement portion of the process. So if we have 7 to 8 years, at least as OFCC said recently, actually I think it was back in November, but there's been, like I said, I validated to check to see if that was still the case. We have a lot of things to think about, and I think that information's power. So having the facility assessment and some of the other information, as well as a little time to advance under maybe the new governor, maybe new things are put in place, it would allow for ample information to decide whether it was time to engage the community in focus groups, things like that. Similar to what was done back in 2011, but with that foundation of 2011 already there and experience going through the process. And we might decide that it's not time to go forward with step 3 and 4 and 5. That's fine. As I mentioned a little earlier in the presentation, we pause, we have our foundation in place, and then we strategically trigger the next steps. Or we say, you know what, this is going well, we feel it's time for our community, it's time for where we want to go, and we go ahead and trigger 3, we go to 4, and we complete our master plan. At any time, we can pull back and have different triggers to this plan. That's the reason it's designed this way. It's flexible, and it's made so we can really feel that we're driving the right direction for our future without feeling like we have to complete a plan just for the sake of completing a plan. So number 4 is establish a focus group, which would be that engagement part of the master plan, and things that would be discussed, a vision for the future, district needs, how they align with programs we have, how our current buildings maybe need different learning, different design to cater to our programs. All those things about investing in the future and potential changes that may be made, so that way we can strengthen what we do here at Fairfield City Schools. In the fifth portion, or the fifth part of this plan, is officially establish an updated master plan. And the master plan would be able to be used for us to move forward with OFCC if we decide to do so. If we didn't decide to do so, we would still have a plan in place that would help guide our district in moving towards the future, whether it's just from a facility maintenance standpoint, a capital improvement standpoint, or just a general plan for operation. And that's the conclusion of my presentation this evening. Do you have any questions?
Any questions or comments?
If I may say, so I can have an idea whether this is something that we'd be interested in moving forward with, if I can have an acknowledgement from the board saying, we'd like you to move forward with step 1 or 2, doesn't have to be verbal. And then the other thing I wanted to say that I didn't, so I kind of turned it over to you guys and I yanked it back, didn't I? I apologize. Mr. Smith's used to me doing that. But the cost for this, for master planning, 100% of the cost last time was approximately $49,000. And that was through the whole process, SHP support, everything they did for us, the binding of information, meeting with us, helping us focus groups and so forth. They agreed that they would honor that same price for this process. And the way it works is up front, it would be half the price up front, well, 24,500 kind of numbers, guys. I try to keep really close outside the estimates. And then if we moved forward with an actual building program through OFCC, or even if we did it independently and we chose them as the architectural firm again, then they would end up waiving that other half. If we did not, then at that time they would say, we need you to go ahead and pay the remaining amount. From what I've seen, and I've talked to some other districts and studied a little bit, that is quite a reasonable price for this type of master planning. And I'm not just talking about the actual facility assessment in the beginning of the capital planning on steps 1 and 2. I'm talking about the whole, 5-step and really getting in and engaging with the community on that final step as you work towards getting something put on the ballot for buildings. So, and that's whenever that would be triggered, if it would be triggered at all. So, okay, I apologize. I'll turn it back over to the board.
Questions? Mr. Hare?
Yeah, I have a few.
Sure.
And your last comments just generated a few more.
Okay.
So, first of all, when Mr. Birding and I were elected to come on this board, we greatly appreciated the planning process of previous boards. When we came on, we already had a facilities plan in place, and the previous board had placed that bond issue on the ballot. That would not have happened without the good planning that was done. It is similar to this. And many times during that bond issue campaign, people were asking us the question, how did you come to that decision? Decision basically being replace the freshmen in Central and add Compass. And, well, why weren't you doing this or why weren't you doing that? We referred them back to that master plan. And that wasn't our decision. That was the community's decision because, as you mentioned further down in your report, stakeholder engagement, and that was very critical. So it wasn't something that just happened overnight. That pre-planning helped us along the way. With that, sometimes people look at the age of buildings and they think the oldest building needs to be replaced when in fact sometimes the oldest building may not be the least sound. And so age doesn't necessarily equate to the one that has to be replaced. So how do you know that? Well, the only way you know that is if you have some kind of a study that looks at the key components of that building to see if it's the one that needs to be replaced, or if all of them or none of them need to be replaced. The other piece that kind of goes along with this is, what's our normal routine maintenance plan? Repairing roofs, HVAC, and those kinds of things. And so what may come out in that report may change over time because of just our normal maintenance. And just because all of our buildings are over that 75% threshold doesn't mean they all need to be replaced. But we've got to have some kind of way to decide that. There's always this balancing act of when do you stop renovating and when do you tear down and build a new one. And so that's not necessarily for this board to decide, but for some future board to decide. Another comment I have is, maybe this is the first of a series of state of the facilities messages. You may recall in 2019, we decided or didn't decide to go with this proposal. And then from that, it's a building block towards what eventually may happen. And, we think that 6, 7, 8 years is a long way away. Well, it's really not. And what we found the last time was that all of a sudden our name popped up, and because we had the plan, we could get on the ballot. So we got on the ballot sooner than we anticipated, so it's always best to be prepared. Regardless of the outcome of the study, and I think the price is reasonable, this does demonstrate our being good stewards of our facilities and physical resources. If somebody said, in what shape are our buildings? And we told them, and they want verification. Don't take our word for it. Don't vote for it without verification from us. And, so how do you verify that? Well, here's the stakeholder input on where we should go. Here's the Steed, Hammond, and Paul report. So it does give us some verification to that. No matter what we do, some people are going to dispute the logic. We had our naysayers in the bond issue that said, oh, you don't need to do the freshman high, you can just renovate. Well, we had those costs and those things worked out. And, I don't know if there's anybody in the community now that can't imagine that that was the right thing to do. So my thoughts are, what's the cost to this district if we don't go forward? You look at $49,000, well, that's a lot of money. Well, we could say that about every expenditure. But if we're going to be good stewards, and we don't do this, and we don't have this assessment, are we being good stewards? We're making decisions without any data to back up some of the decisions that we're making. And so those are my thoughts. Having been through building processes many times, if you don't engage the community, that's not acceptable. And once you do engage the community, they'll help be the advocates for what we need to do. And the lack of planning is a plan to fail. So for future boards, I think we need to do this to set them up for some of the decisions that they're going to face.
Mr. Hare, may I comment on one of the things you said? The key to this is these will be independent assessments. And currently right now when we build 5-year plans out, for instance, we're on a 5-year paving plan that the team and Mr. Weiser put together. We're at the end of the 5 years, and the parking lots, from what I've seen and looked at data from, have improved greatly because of that. Roofs, same thing. We will put together plans so that way we can project and work with Mrs. Lane and making sure that we have a plan in place. But the value of having a cohesive plan that is done by independent assessment instead of trying to pull multiple vendors in and trying to get their independent opinions and to kind of use logic to decode is a very powerful thing also that would feed into the master plan. So I just want to throw that in.
Any questions or comments?
Well, I think it's always good to be prepared for the future, for what's coming. Thanks for putting this together. Gives us something to consider.
Mr. Begley?
I tend to agree. I think a facilities assessment makes a lot of sense.
And then will if we move forward, we'll look at our existing master plan and tweak it, so to speak? Is that sort of the idea? Because there was a group of people that spent a lot of time, and I know times change, programming changes, needs change, but I'm assuming that you'll at least have that as a base to go off of to see if that's where we want to go.
That's exactly what these presentations have been built off of. And that's one of the things, at least staying with SHP and being cohesive with them, it's going to allow us to use that, like I said, as that foundation, and then we build off of that. So there won't be quite as an in-depth process because we're not starting from scratch because of the hard work that's already been put in.
So what I'm hearing from the board, it looks like we're in favor of you proceeding with starting the assessment process.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
I'm going to assume that cost is going to come out of the general fund.
Yes, sir.
And it'll be reflected in our 5-year forecast.
Yes, sir.
For 2 months.
It'll be projected, yes.
I'd like to thank Mrs. Shorter for being part of the original process. You were on the board when that was started. The other members were not, so thank you for your diligence of getting that taken care of.
Thank you.
Thank you.